Welcome to this Institute of Welsh Affairs debate on the UK's membership of the European Union. Possibly within a few months, certainly by the end of next year, each and every one of us will be asked to vote on the biggest constitutional decision facing the United Kingdom in decades. The arguments on both sides of the debate are strongly held, and we expect them to be passionately discussed tonight. Putting the case for Britain's continued membership of the European Union is Labour's First Minister of Wales, Carwyn, and speaking against is the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage. Please welcome them both to the stage now.
Thanks for doing this. Same time, you too. What is this? Thank you. Are we this way around?
Yes, that's right. In a moment, I'm going to ask both of you to make your opening statements. I'll then put questions to you for around about half an hour on some of the main areas of dispute. After that, I'll be taking questions from the audience here in the Hodinard Hall. Everybody knows which parties you lead. I don't think we need to discuss that any further. You're here tonight, though, speaking for the Remain and Leave sides of the referendum debate. Please avoid party politicking and electioneering. Try your best, at least. Let's begin then with your opening statements. Try to keep them to 3 minutes, and we'll start with you, Nigel Farage.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everybody. And a massive thanks to Carwyn for challenging me to this debate. It's the first big debate that's taken place around the United Kingdom, and it couldn't be more timely, given the Prime Minister's very strong hints yesterday that this referendum is probably going to come in June or July of this year. The question, of course, is whether we wish to remain or leave the European Union. But I wonder whether people have thought through what that actually means. The question is, do we wish to regain our independence as a nation state? Do we want to be free to make our own laws? Do we want our own courts to be supreme? Do we want to take back control of our borders? Do we want to be, like 200 countries around the world, a normal, self-governing nation and live in a true democracy where the people that we vote for and the people that we can sack are the ones that make our laws? Or are we to stay part of, not Europe? This debate tonight is not about Europe. Europe is a continent of diverse countries and peoples and cultures and is a fantastic, fascinating and exciting place. What we're talking about is the European Union, a political union that makes the majority of our laws and a political union whose courts can override us and that now has a flag, an anthem, a police force and is hungry to have its own army. Namely, are we happy to be a subordinate member of a bigger club? Now, clearly I want independence. I believe we'll be better off out. I believe we can free up our 5 million men and women running small businesses. I believe we should make our own trade deals and stand on our own on the world stage and re-engage with the Commonwealth and others. We should be in charge of our key industries, like steel and fisheries, which if we had been, Wales would find itself better off. And crucially, yes, I do believe we should control our own borders. I think unlimited EU immigration has driven down wages and put, frankly, intolerable pressures on our health and education systems. I want us to have an Australian-style point system. I want immigration to be a positive topic in this country, not a negative one, but it can't be as members of a European Union. Now, you will hear scaremongering. We may even hear some tonight. We may be told that if we weren't in the European Union, trade would cease, jobs would be lost, we'd finish up somehow living in caves. These arguments generally are made by the same people who said if we didn't join the euro, we'd be ruined. And in my experience, these arguments are made by people who've never worked in trade or international business. Yes, I accept Brussels and the EU has been fantastic for career politics and for civil servants. But I don't believe it's given any benefit to ordinary working people whatsoever. The truth of it is, and I saw this last year in debates with Clegg and Miliband and Cameron, our political class don't think we're big enough or good enough to be in control of our own country and make our own laws. I believe we are big enough and strong enough and good enough, and I want you to grab this historic opportunity to take back control of our own lives. Thank you.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much for your opening statement and for keeping to time. Now for your opening statement, Carwyn Jones.
Thank you. Croeso I Gymru. Nigel, welcome to Wales and welcome to all of you this evening, whether in this room or listening outside. And as First Minister of Wales, I'm here to tell you what this decision really means for our country. And that starts with an admission. There won't always be easy answers to complicated questions. In fact, if a politician ever tells you there's an easy answer to a complicated question, they're pulling the wool over your eyes. Because this is a serious debate about our future. I'm incredibly proud to be First Minister of Wales, a country that's always punched above its weight in terms of arts, sports and culture, and now in our economy as well. Record foreign direct investment into Wales this year, more good jobs closer to home with better pay. And Wales is part of two unions that provide us with stability, security and prosperity. The union of the United Kingdom and the union that is the European Union. Neither one is perfect. You've heard me talk many times about the need to change Wales's relationship with Westminster, but I will never advocate giving up and walking away. There's a saying, decisions are made by those who turn up. If you want change, you got to work for it, not walk away from the table. And that's what we need to do in terms of the European Union. And now, more than ever, is the time to work together nationally and internationally. 200,000 jobs in Wales rely on European trade. Europe is our largest trading partner. 43% of our trade is with EU countries. Hundreds of Welsh students study in Europe every year. Many more go there to work and thousands of families holiday there with full health protection should anything go wrong. And for the first time in a long time, our football team will be there in June as well. Wales is at home in Europe, and Europe is at home in Wales. 500 companies from other EU countries have their base in Wales. I don't want those companies to feel they're no longer welcome and to see them up sticks to Italy and Spain. I don't want to put up barriers for companies paying Welsh workers a good wage, giving them apprenticeships and investing in our young people. What kind of future do we want for our children and our grandchildren? What kind of Wales do we want? The choice is between pulling up the drawbridge, becoming isolated with devastating consequences, or looking outwards with confidence, working with others and taking our place in the world. Nigel, I think, wants to turn the clock back. I want Wales to move forward. A vote in the referendum to stay in would be the vote of a confident nation, a country that's comfortable with our place in the world, a country that still believes that we have a role to play on the international stage. And I believe that Wales is that confident country.
Adrian Jones, thank you very much. Thank you to both of you for your opening statements. Thank you to the audience for your approval or disapproval. I think we're in for a lively debate tonight. We now enter into a half hour or so of discussion and debate between Nigel Farage and Carwyn Jones. I'll be asking general questions with follow-up challenges on a range of the main sticking points, I suppose, when it comes to the debate. And let's begin with the big picture about whether or not the EU could be reformed from within, or whether that has to be done by leaving. So can the EU be reformed in the UK's interests, or is leaving it the only way to achieve change? Carwyn Jones.
I don't believe leaving is in our interest. We know that the CBI have said that every household in Britain benefits to the tune of £3,000. I've already mentioned that 200,000 jobs in Wales rely on unfettered access to the European Union. So, of course, there needs to be change. The European Union needs to be more transparent. It could stop moving between Brussels and Strasbourg all the time. The European Parliament, that much is true. But there needs to be more power given as well to the European Parliament. But from our point of view in Wales, we benefit immensely from the money that's come into Wales, from our ability to trade freely with the rest of the European Union. We mustn't play games with that. We shouldn't take the risk with our future in that way.
Nigel Farage?
Well, we'll debate the economics later. The question was, can the EU be reformed? Now, they're talking about reform in Brussels every single day. I've been there for donkey's years. But reform over there means something rather different to what reform means here. Reform there means a greater centralisation of powers. And they're pushing full steam ahead to do that and probably to have another treaty in circa 2020. The reforms that I think would convince people in Wales and across the UK that it was right to vote to remain a member would be if we got back control of our borders, namely if we were able to put in place an Australian-style point system, and if the UK Parliament got back a veto over any European law that it didn't like. If Cameron was able to negotiate those things, I think people would vote overwhelmingly to stay part of this union because they would see it as a cooperative club. But those things aren't even being discussed. They're not even on the agenda. In fact, the only thing that Dave, as he likes to be called, has asked for is a slight reduction on benefits that we pay to migrants. Can it be reformed? Well, Carwyn mentioned the European Parliament, the annual travelling circus that once a month goes from Brussels to Strasbourg and back again. What he didn't mention was the fact that the third home is in Luxembourg, and documents go back and forth from there every day too. To reform that needs a unanimous vote in the Council of Ministers, and the French will never vote for it. If you can't even reform the fact that Parliament has got 2 homes or 3 homes, what chance is there of Britain getting a better deal? It won't happen.
Carwyn Jones?
Well, from my point of view, I want to see a European Union that's outward-looking, a European Union that knows what it takes to attract investment in, and I want to be part of that. The European Union is one of the world's biggest markets. Why on earth would we take the risk of leaving that market and making it more difficult for British goods and British services to enter that market? Yes, there is always a need for reform. There's a need for reform within the UK as well. But from my point of view, it's not a question of leaving. We need to make sure that all those people, that 200,000 jobs that I talked about earlier on, that those people have the security of knowing that their jobs are safe and not play games by taking the risk of leaving.
Do you acknowledge...
Is there a single law, is there a single power that the Labour Party would like to campaign for Britain to get back? Is there just one, please?
Well, from my point of view, I'd like to see powers devolved to Wales as well. We haven't talked about that.
Well, if we haven't got powers in the UK... I want to make
sure that we see that Wales gets the same kind of powers as Scotland. We don't talk about that. Your party doesn't talk about that. But if we haven't got powers in Westminster, we can't devolve them to Wales. And that's the point. Most of our laws are being made somewhere else.
And that's it.
What percentage of our laws are made elsewhere?
Carwyn Jones,
what percentage?
Before I let you ask him a direct question, answer his direct question about is there a single law that you would want repatriated in the jargon? You want more say for Wales with more devolution. Why not more say for the UK?
I think a lot more can be done in terms, for example, of looking at the benefits that people have when they come to the UK. From my point of view, I don't think people should be able to claim benefits as soon as they arrive in the UK.
That's a Tory position, isn't it?
Let him answer.
I think that needs
Can we have a Labour policy?
No, it isn't. It's Labour policy as well. If you look, yes, it is. Well, if you look at your facts, Labour policy was that it would be 2 years before people could claim. And that is the reality of the situation. So I think that does need to be looked at. What I don't want to see is a scenario where we play games with people's jobs, play games with people's livelihoods, and cut ourselves off from one of the world's biggest markets.
Now, I cut you off from asking Nigel Farage a question. Can you explain why you're asking him that question first? Because I think I know what's behind it.
What question?
You were asking about the percentage of laws made in Europe.
Well, I haven't had an answer.
OK, well, why are you asking the question?
75% is a conservative estimate. It's probably slightly higher than that.
Where do you get that figure from?
In Germany...
Where do you get that figure from?
In Germany...
Where do you get that figure from?
Let me finish. In Germany, the retired Chancellor was commissioned, and I wish we'd commissioned, because we keep asking Labour and Tory governments, can we please have an official study on this? But in Germany, they did commission the former Chancellor, and he looked at the amount of German federal law, made
We're talking
between...
about Germany, you're talking about Britain.
Well, we're in the same European Union, and one law applies to everybody.
Laws are made in the
and
European
in Germany,
Union.
from 1998 to 2006...
You're making it up as you go along, Nigel.
84% of German federal laws were made in the European Union, and the former German Chancellor said it is difficult to describe modern-day Germany as a self-governing
But
democracy.
you're in Britain now, you're not in Germany.
Well,
you're not
it
in
is
Germany.
84
So
in
where do you
Germany.
get the figure?
It is 84 in
Where
Germany.
do you get the figure? Well, that 75% of British laws are made in the European Union.
And it is a crucial point
Where's the
that
figure
Carwyn
from?
Jones is making, because that figure
in
has
Germany
been
it's
disputed.
84%.
Well, I don't care about Germany. What is it in
Our
Britain?
think tank estimates are 75%, but I accept
What think
it
tank?
may be higher than that. After all, you're the First Minister of Wales, totally impotent when it comes to helping the steel factories.
I'm not making
8 out of 9 of which are closed.
What can you do? Well, let's talk about steel. Let's talk about steel.
Yeah.
You're a member of the European Parliament. What have you done to protect British steel? What meetings have you been to? Where have you spoken? You talked about fisheries earlier on. You're a member of the Fisheries Committee. You're a member of the Fisheries Committee. There were 42 committee meetings. You went to 1. Is that speaking up for Britain?
Do you know, just 2 weeks ago, and here we are in South Wales, where people from England and all over, and Welsh people too, spend a lot of money going to wonderful places like Swansea Harbour and all along your bays and headlands, spending their hard-earned money to catch bass. As of the 1st of January, a European regulation has banned anglers in Wales and the rest of the UK from taking home a single bass for the next 6 months. That piece of regulation, which will hurt jobs in South Wales very badly, was not debated in the British Parliament, was not debated here in the National Assembly, and was not debated or voted on in the European Parliament. And the point, Carwyn, is we're in something that is fundamentally undemocratic. There is little elected politicians can do to change a dot or a comma.
If you felt that strongly, why didn't you go to the 42 fisheries meetings that you could have gone to? You
Because
just went
if
to
I'd
one.
done
The reality is you don't stand up for Britain. You're all talk, no action.
Because, as I've just explained to you, if I'd spent every living moment there, I wouldn't have even been allowed to debate or vote
That's
the
what you
issues
get paid
that
for.
affect fisheries. The Parliament hasn't got that power. Remember, it's the unelected Commission that have the sole right of initiative in Europe to propose legislation, and that is a fact.
All right, okay.
You're paid
Final
to
word,
go and
Carwyn
make
Jones.
Britain's case in the European Union. You could have made Britain's case on the Fisheries Committee you were a member of. You went there once on 42 occasions.
But if I can't vote on what affects us, what does it matter whether I go or not and sign in for
Okay,
a
no,
allowance?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much on that scope at the moment. Nigel Farage.
You're not doing well at the European Union, you're right.
We've looked at this point particularly clearly. Let's stay with jobs. And you've mentioned a figure of jobs, Carwyn Jones. You, as a party, claim that jobs will be lost. Do you jobs are lost as being part of the EU? Do you accept Carwyn Jones's point that jobs will be lost as a result of Britain leaving the EU?
No, I think we can create more jobs. Particularly, as I said earlier, there are actually 5.2 million men and women who've got the guts in the UK to run their own small businesses. And my goodness me, it takes guts, given the sheer regulatory burden that they're on. The estimate is that a small business now spends 25% of its working week, the bosses, complying with European directives that have been transposed into British law.
Which ones?
Deregulate,
Which ones?
take the
Just a
pressure
moment,
off their
Carwyn Jones.
backs, and we'll see job. I mean, my last trip to Wales a few weeks ago, I went down to Swansea to see a guy who'd taken a risk, remortgaged his house, set up a company called Celtic Vapes, where he makes, the liquids that go in e-cigarettes. Done brilliantly well, employing over a dozen men and women there in Swansea, now sees his business directly under threat because of a European directive that you can't vote on, I can't vote on, and frankly, if we free up small business, we'll create more jobs in the British economy.
All right, thank
because
you.
there is, just one last point if I may.
Very quickly.
Business is business. Governments don't do business, consumers do business. We trade with the European Union at a massive deficit every year. Trade will continue with Europe totally unaffected, whether a member of the Union.
We will come back to that point in just a moment, Nigel Farage. But Carwyn Jones, Much as I'm enjoying the questions you're throwing, Nigel Farage, I'd like to hear some detailed answers from you on the number of jobs, where you get the figure of 200,000 jobs that are created by the EU, and will they be affected by Britain being...
They are the figures that represent the jobs of people who work in businesses that trade
What
directly
sort of
with
jobs?
the EU. Airbus, 6,000 jobs. What have Airbus said? We can stay in the EU. Tata Steel, thousands of jobs.
Just a moment.
Yes, they
Nigel.
have.
No, they haven't.
22nd of September 2014.
Nigel,
22nd of September 2014, Robin Southwell, Airbus said exactly that. Check your facts.
it may be
Tata Steel, 27th of August 2015, said exactly the same thing.
It may be January, but it's not pantomime season.
These are major employers in Wales. Their view surely has to count for something, Nigel. We know that there are big companies, the length and breadth of Wales, who say to us it's important to be a member of the EU. I go out and I look to bring investment into Wales. We've had the best investment figures for the past 30 years in Wales. And I can tell you, the companies that I speak to say it's really important we have access to the single market and that you're members of the EU, because we see Wales as our base for the EU. Now, what you're saying is that those people's views are not important.
Well, can we just get facts here? And you're quite right to talk about Airbus in Flintshire. It's very important. Not by the way just important, not just important for jobs in Flintshire, but actually rather important for Airbus, because they make the wings. If they didn't make the wings, there wouldn't be any aeroplanes. They are interdependent. And in the modern world, the global world, we are increasingly interdependent. And the chief executive of Airbus last summer said he has no intention of pulling manufacturing out of Britain if we voted to leave the European Union. And they are the facts. And stop trying to scare people. The big companies are sensible, whether it's Nissan, whether it's Airbus, the big companies are all saying the same thing. The banks, they're all saying the same thing. You know, whether Britain's a member of the European Union or not, they invest in this country because we've got a good workforce, and actually it's the right thing for them to do.
They are interested in a market. They are interested in a market of 500 million people. If you look at Ford, Toyota, if you look at Airbus, if you look at Tata Steel, if you look at General Electric, these are all companies that are in Wales because it's a European base for... Of course they are. That's why they come here in the first place. Access to that single market is that... Nigel, I speak to them. I speak to them. What do? You don't speak to anybody. You don't turn up in the European Parliament.
I'm sorry, but you're out of date. You're out of date. We did get some of these scare stories.
We
did get these scare stories. At the time of the euro, some of the big companies tried to bully Britain into going into the euro. They threatened to withdraw investment unless Britain joined the euro. We didn't join the euro. They didn't withdraw investment. They've now stopped that scare tactic. They're now all saying the same thing. They will stay in Britain. We will go on doing business with Europe, regardless whether we're a member of that union or not. And you've got to stop this scaremongering, because it's simply not true.
The CBI have said that each household in Britain benefits to the tune of £3,000 from our membership of the European Union. Are you saying the CBI are wrong? The
CBI is a very interesting case. They've been wrong about everything since the gold standard in 1929, interestingly. But this was, and it's worth remembering, this was the same CBI, the very same CBI, who told us we must join the euro, otherwise the city and manufacturing in Britain would be damaged. And actually what we saw by not joining the euro was foreign and direct investment into Britain go up, not down.
Carwyn Jones, there's considerable concern about jobs in the steel industry, and that's a particular issue for here in Wales. Has it been, as Nigel Farage and UKIP say, has it been EU rules and the climate change agenda that have cost those jobs, or is it something else?
Nothing to do with it, the EU. It's to do with the fact that there's a glut of steel on the world market.
Yes.
So if you speak to Tata, that's what they'll tell you. There's a glut of steel on the world market. The strong pound, and also the fact, of course, that we know that there are difficulties with energy costs in the UK. We've been lobbying the UK government for years to reduce the cost of energy for companies like Tata. They've said they're going to do something, they haven't done it. I met with Tata last month. Those are the issues they identified to me. Not once did they mention the European Union as being some kind of obstacle.
And Nigel Farage, that undermines your claim directly.
Before doing politics, I had a proper job, and For 20 years, I worked in the metals business, so I know something. I travelled all over the place, actually. I work with manufacturers, people who do, metal bashers, people actually making things and employing people, all right? And let me just tell you something. What has happened in China is you've seen a massive period of industrial growth that has now slowed. A huge overproduction of steel, a depreciating yuan, not just against the pound, but against other currencies. And what they've done is they've dumped their excess steel on the world markets, which has artificially depressed the price, especially in this country. And what we should have been able to do, what you here under devolved powers or Westminster or both of you should have been able to do, and what in your heart you would have wanted to do, is to stop the dumping of that steel, to give the last proper steel plant in Wales a chance of continuing. You didn't do it, not because you didn't want to, because you haven't got the power to do it, because we've given that away to Brussels. And that's the point
Carwyn Jones, your response to that point specifically.
Tata Steel have a European operation. Port Talbot has a sister plant in Holland. That sister plant, if you had your way, would be in the EU, and Port Talbot would be outside of the EU. Where do you think the investment will go in the future?
To wherever it was best for the investor. And
where the market is. Where the market is. And the market's not in Britain, it's in the EU.
No, I'll answer that. If the plant in Wales was able short-term to protect itself against artificial dumping of steel, and the plant in the Netherlands wasn't, I know where my money would go.
They're run by the same company. And the reality is, again, what have you done in the European Parliament to speak up for steel in Britain?
Oh, goodness me. If I look at what we've done as a party on the Industry and Trade Committee, I have been there, I have voted and voted and voted against these European directives. I've watched the Labour Party.
What have you said about steel?
I've watched the Labour Party transfer more and more and more of our ability to govern this nation across to Europe. And the time has come to be honest and to say, look, the common market might have been a good idea to get rid of tariffs 40 years ago, but it's now gone too far. It's an over-bureaucratised union. It is not doing any good for British business or British workers.
That's not an answer. I've spoken to Tata. I've spoken to Tata in Port Talbot, Tata in Europe, and Tata in Mumbai. I spent a long time discussing their problems with them. That's what I do. From what I can gather from what you do, it's absolutely nothing.
All right, I want to move
nothing on behalf of steel in Britain.
I need to move the topic
on the European Parliament. You come here and you claim to be the great defender of steel in Britain. You've done absolutely nothing before this evening to defend steel in Wales or in the rest of Britain.
I suspect the reason you challenged me to this debate is that if it wasn't for UKIP and what I'd done, there wouldn't even be a referendum. So that's what we've done. There is going to be a debate.
Don't change the subject.
I want to move the... Carwyn Jones. I want to move the subject on to aid. Carwyn Jones, Wales receives more in terms of aid, as you've spoken about already, from the EU than people here pay out. I want both of you to explain to me why you think that EU aid is a good thing for Wales or a bad thing for Wales. Carwyn Jones.
It's brought billions into our economy. It's made sure that we've been able to train our young people. 17,000 young people have had the chance of training through Jobs Growth Wales, and they've found jobs as a result. We've seen, for example, Swansea University campus being built because of European money. We see our farmers who rely on subsidies from the European Union and access to the European market to make a living. There would be no living for farmers in Wales without that.
Do they rely too much on it?
They rely just as other farmers do across the European Union. The reality is that without the European market and free access to it, our farmers have got very little market to sell into. We need to keep that market. Again, it's coming back to the huge risk to Wales of leaving the EU. We know where we are at the moment. Why would we take the risk and leave the world's biggest market?
Nigel Farage, Wales is a net beneficiary of EU aid?
Arguable.
Well, the figures speak for themselves.
Well, the figures do speak for themselves. Wales is 5% of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom gives a gross 20 billion a year to the European Union. 5% of that would be nearly £1 billion. Actually, that is Wales's contribution. What does Wales get back every year? About £500 million. All right?
It's a lot more than that, Nigel.
Now,
it's a lot more than that.
Your figures are very debatable, but £500 million, 60 million euros looks to be the right figure. But either way, let's just talk about the money, because that was the question. 40% of that money that comes to Wales comes back in the form of agricultural support. Carwyn's idea that without EU money, all farming in Wales would cease is ludicrous. I mean, farming wasn't invented here in 1975. You know, they've been farming. I mean, and everybody knows, particularly with the difficult conditions of the upland farms, they couldn't survive without government help. If we didn't support them, there'd be rural dereliction and desolation. The British government supported farming before we joined the common market, and will support farming after we're in the common market.
Pause now, because Carwyn Jones is going to respond to that. Carwyn Jones, your response.
Are you saying to our farmers you would put at risk the £260 million that they receive now, and instead go for something that they have absolutely no idea what the end game will be? That's what you're saying. Now they get £260 million, and also they have unfettered access to the European market to sell lamb and beef. Do you really think that market will still be there?
That's very interesting.
We were members of the EU?
That's very interesting. The farmers, the Welsh farmers with good product, do have unfettered access to the European markets, but because of huge tariffs on agriculture, their ability to sell into non-EU markets is severely restricted. And there's actually an argument that outside the EU, and by bringing down protective agricultural tariffs, actually, Welsh farmers may find there are more markets to sell their goods into, not less. On the rest of the money.
How does that work?
On the rest of the money. Well, it works because the Common Agricultural Policy is a fiercely protectionist scheme that puts massive tariffs on non-EU countries. It's a protectionist system that was designed basically to protect the massive French farming industry. And I think it's about time we opened up some of these agricultural markets, particularly to the poor third world, and gave them a chance to sell some of their product to us without us penalising them as heavily as we do.
Carwyn Jones. Wouldn't you... Some say that the Common Agricultural Policy ties your hands. Wouldn't you prefer to set the agenda and the targets?
I think it brings money into farming, it brings money into the Rural Development Programme, it gives us the opportunity to sell our goods into Europe. All these things are absolutely crucial for Welsh farming. And Nigel, you complain about the Common Agricultural Policy, but if you had your way, Britain would have no voice with regard to the Common Agricultural Policy because we wouldn't be members of the EU. Better surely to be in the EU, influencing the CAP, rather than shouting on the sidelines.
Oh, believe you me, when Tony Blair, your former party leader, was at the height of his powers, he made the centrepiece of his presidency of the European Union reform of the Common Agricultural Policy. He utterly failed to do it and gave away £7 billion of the British rebate to do so. I don't believe having a voice in Brussels is what matters in a global economy. What matters in a global economy is having a voice on the world stage. And when at the World Trade Organization we discuss steel, or we discuss agriculture, or whatever it is, despite the fact we're the 5th biggest economy in the world, there is no British representative at the World Trade Organization. We have withdrawn from it completely. We have zero global influence on trade because an unelected Brussels commissioner represents us. I want Britain to get back its voice in the world.
Carwyn Jones.
But I have to say that if you had your way, we would have free trade agreements we'd have to negotiate with 50 countries, plus the EU. Well, isn't that can be done?
Isn't it interesting that little Switzerland, much derided, Switzerland negotiates all her own trade deals. Switzerland has more global free trade agreements that she's done for herself than the European Union has managed to achieve. And the next worrying phase, Carwyn, and I'm sure you're worried, is the next trade deal, as opposed to free trade agreement, that the European Union's working on, is this TTIP treaty with America that may well open up the National Health Service to foreign American health companies. So I'm not sure the EU trade policy actually will suit us, and I'm strongly opposed to it.
But Nigel, Switzerland pays money to the EU to access the single market.
Well, do you know, it's quite funny, actually.
Well, it's not quite funny. It does pay money to access the single market.
Switzerland's a very small country. Norway equally is a very small country.
They also pay money to access the European market.
They have got their own deals. But when I hear people like you and David Cameron saying, wouldn't it be ghastly to be like the Norwegians or the Swiss? I scratch my head and think, what, independent and rich? It doesn't sound too bad to me.
pays money to access the single market. So that financial argument is at the window as far as you're concerned. We wouldn't save any money. It's bound by European rules that it has of course it is, that it has no say over. Norwegian salmon is the subject of a 12% tariff into the European market. Now, let me finish. This is all true, okay? Switzerland pays money to access the European market, except it can't allow, its service industry isn't allowed to operate in the European market. And guess what? Immigration levels from other EU countries is twice as high in Switzerland as it is in Britain,
because they've chosen
and far higher in Norway than it is in Britain.
Because
so
they've
actually leaving the EU
because they've chosen that.
Immigration.
They've chosen that. The point is, I mean, you go and tell the Welsh fishermen that Norway's got a rotten deal when they've got an exclusive economic zone up to 200 miles. The Norwegians can veto any piece of EU law that doesn't suit them. So recently, they vetoed the Postal Services Directive. But the point is this: those of us that don't wish to remain members of this political union, we're not advocating a Swiss model. We're not advocating a Norwegian model. We're advocating a British model as their biggest trading partner in the world.
What does that mean?
And the point about this is,
what does it mean?
We want to have good relations, free trade, friendship and cooperation, and we know it's in the interests of French wine producers, of German car manufacturers, for that to be the case.
All right, thank you very much.
Exporters.
All right, thank you very much.
We export half of what we produce. The rest of the EU only exports 10% back to us. We are far more dependent on the European market. The European market is on us by a mile.
Well, Nigel Farage, I want to leave that topic there because I want to move. I don't think we've had enough controversy yet. So we'll try to tackle immigration.
Oh, right.
And I want to ask the very broad question, which I'm expecting some challenging answers on. Will remaining or leaving the EU make any difference to attempts to limit immigration? Carwyn Jones.
None whatsoever. What can I say, first of all, it's not racist to be worried about immigration. Okay, let's get that out of the way first. It's a big issue. It deserves proper debate. There are people out there who are concerned for what it means for jobs and what it means in terms of their community. So let's make sure that we recognise that. But I don't see that Nigel's proposals would tackle immigration. UKIP's favourite country is Norway. What does immigration look like there? I've mentioned it. What does it look like in Switzerland? Douglas Carswell has said that Switzerland has the best immigration policy in the world. But EU migration is higher in Norway and higher still in Switzerland. In fact, if the UK adopted the Swiss model, there would be 390,000 extra EU migrants per year coming into the UK. So let's have a debate about immigration, but let's not pretend that the EU has anything to do with this. And ask yourself this: if we weren't members of the EU, why would France continue to pay for those who are in camps in Calais and elsewhere? They just let them through. Why on earth would they do that for us if we weren't members of the European Union? Would it be in our interest to turn our backs on our European partners? Or isn't it better to work together and find a European solution to what is a European challenge?
Nigel Farage.
I've heard some old baloney from the Labour Party on immigration over the last few years.
Let's hear some from you.
Such as
let's hear some from you.
Such as opening up the door to the whole of Eastern Europe would lead to an extra 13,000 people a year, when it led to a couple of 100,000 a year. But never have I heard anything so utterly and entirely fraudulent as what you've said this evening, that leaving the EU has got nothing to do with immigration into Britain. Can we just be clear? Every one of you that has got a United Kingdom passport, if you haven't looked at it recently, have a look at it. Because the first two words on it are European Union. And that passport effectively is shared by 485 million people. And every one of those people across 28 countries has absolutely untrammeled free rights to come to Britain, regardless whether they're bringing any benefits, regardless whether they're very good people that can be great for our communities,
and every
or bad
British
people.
Person has those same
and
rights
every British person has the same right. And do you know what? In the first 20 years of EEC membership, free movement amongst countries that had roughly similar wealth standards, similar health standards, similar education standards was a non-issue. But as soon as we let in the former communist countries, you didn't need to be a rocket scientist to see what would happen. And I'm simply saying this: You keep telling me all these countries that you think I want to be like. I've said already, I don't want to be like Australia, I don't want to be like Switzerland or Norway, but to have an Australian-style point system where we can choose who comes to Britain from anywhere in the world. We can forbid people with criminal records. We can stop benefits.
You won't know they have records
We'll stop benefits for 5 years,
warrant.
and we'll take people that speak English and integrate into our communities. That surely is the best policy of the lot and the biggest benefit of leaving the European Union.
Carwyn Jones.
Nigel, you won't know whether those people have criminal records or not, because you want to withdraw from the security cooperation that we have that enables us to arrest people who flee to other countries. And so you want to withdraw from that cooperation. How will you know there are criminal records?
I want to stop foreign terrorists coming into Britain in unlimited numbers. You're absolutely right.
So do we.
Yes, I do.
So do we all.
Yes, I do.
So do we all.
And actually,
that's not the point.
Actually,
how will you know?
And I think...
How will you know that they have criminal records?
You know, you only have to look at the fact that 2 of the Paris bombers had come in through the Greek islands to understand that the European Union has made a terrible, terrible mistake with its common asylum policy. And remember this, Germany has let in about 1 million people this year. Those people very shortly will have German passports. Once they have a German passport, that is the same as a British passport. And I want us to be able strictly to control who comes to Britain, because I fear that international terrorism is the greatest threat that our children are going to face.
Carwyn Jones.
But the whole point is this, Nigel. This needs European cooperation. Sorry. You can't fight terrorism unless you have cooperation across the whole of Europe, without any controls, without any factors. What you're suggesting, that we should be somehow aside of that. How will you know whether these people have criminal records if you're not cooperating with countries elsewhere in Europe?
Wait a moment, please. We will come back to that.
You don't want the European arrest warrant?
No, I don't.
Why?
Because I believe in our freeborn rights since Magna Carta, so we should not be able to be taken off to a Greek jail, chucked in a Greek jail for 2 years without anybody presenting us with a charge. We need to get
extradition. Make it far more difficult to pursue criminals.
Extradition matters.
Carwyn Jones, please could you address directly the points that Nigel Farage was making, concerns about international terrorism, concerns about the screening of potential international terrorists amongst
He's absolutely right about terrorism. Nobody's going to argue that we need to make sure that terrorists don't come into Europe. That much is true. It's a European problem. It needs a European solution. Of course there should be.
But they're coming in willy-nilly every day.
They do now. There are passport checks now for everybody coming into the UK, except if you come in from the Republic of Ireland, of course, where there are no passport checks at all. We see people being held in Calais. And I said to you, what's going to happen there if we're not members of the EU? Do you really think that France is going to play ball and say to us, we will hold these people here? No, they're going to say, well, off you go then, into the UK. Immigration is an issue for the whole of Europe. It needs a European solution to deal with it. No. We can't just sit behind a fence and expect it to go away.
The demands of Romania, the demands of Lithuania, whose population has fallen by 25% in 11 years, are completely different to the demands of the United Kingdom, where our population is going up by at least 1/3 a year because of open-door immigration and at a level over which we have no control. We need a British policy to deal with immigration, not an EU policy.
What's it going to do with the EU, though? As I said before, Norway and Switzerland and Iceland, they're not members of the EU, yet their level of migration from the EU is far higher than Britain's.
Because they've chosen that. They've chosen that. We should not choose that.
On the topic of those countries, and before we open up the questions to the audience, a final thought, really, I suppose, on all of this. You've mentioned Norway and Switzerland. There's Iceland as well. Can Britain survive and thrive outside the EU, or will it become an economic irrelevance?
I think it's too big a risk to leave the biggest market that we've been members of. We know that it supports jobs in Wales, supports training in Wales, supports farming in Wales. And my view is, why on earth would we gamble with all that? We don't need to be an isolationist country. We know that we benefit from our membership of the European Union. Why would we take that step in the dark? Now, I'm interested to hear. I mean, Nigel has said, in fairness, he has a vision for Britain outside the EU. What is it?
Why can't Britain have a viable future outside of the EU?
When I look to bring investors into Wales, as I've said, The major thing for them is that we are members of the European Union. Why? It's a big market. It's a European market. Why would they come to the UK with 60 million when they can go to the European Union with 500 million? We have many, many thousands of people in Wales who work for companies who use Wales as their European base. Anything that interferes with that is bad for jobs and bad for people's pockets.
Nigel Farage, as has been, as Carwyn Jones has said repeatedly, Norway and Switzerland pay significant amounts to the EU without the same sort of influence.
Well, actually, Norway doesn't pay it to the EU. Norway pays it directly to developing countries. That's what it chooses to do.
But you'd still be paying into the
we don't need to pay a penny piece. We don't need to pay a penny piece into the European Union.
No
by the way,
agreements.
while we're at it, we should cut the foreign aid budget as well, because much of it is going to the wrong place. But the fundamental question here, you know, we talked a few minutes ago about agriculture. And Carwyn believes that Welsh agriculture should be run and decided in Brussels. He was completely clear that he believes that is the right thing. And that, in a sense, goes back to my opening statement. This whole debate is actually about one simple thing. You know, whether people on a platform tell you you'll be better off or worse off, all of that, I guess, to some extent is arguable because it's up to people's opinions. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what is not arguable. If we decide to leave political union and to take back control of our lives, we will once again be a self-governing democracy. And we will govern our farming industry and govern our fishing industry and govern our steel industry. And you know what? We might do it really badly, or we might do it really well. But we'll be able once every 4 or 5 years to sack the people who are in charge and to vote for somebody else with a completely different manifesto. And here's the point if you believe in democracy, for good or bad. There is nothing the electors in Wales or the United Kingdom or the members of the National Assembly for Wales or the members of Westminster or the members of the European Parliament can do to change one single European law. That is not democracy. That is not what those that went before us fought for. I want to live in a free democracy.
All right, thank you very much. This is Carwyn Jones. Carwyn Jones, this is...
There are plenty of people.
Can I just say, this is not your final closing statement, even though that sounded like a final closing statement.
There are plenty of
please
people across Europe who fought against the Nazis, who believe in the same thing, but are happy members of the European Union. The Poles who come here are the grandchildren, the people who stood with us on D-Day, those tank regiments, those pilots in the RAF. Those are the people. Those are the people who stood by us during the war, who you're now abusing. Where is the gratitude from your point of view?
And interestingly, Euroscepticism isn't just in this country. Euroscepticism is now sweeping the whole of Europe, as increasingly people in Poland agree with my analysis that Poland should govern itself.
How many countries want to leave the EU?
Okay.
I think once Britain does, a lot of countries will.
How many countries want to leave the EU?
Thank you both. We're not going to take on another question from either of you now, because we've come to the end of that particular session. And yet, I think something tells me that we're going to have some more challenging and controversial questions because we're opening it up to the audience. I should just say to the audience that there are microphones either side. If you show your hands if you're interested in asking a question, I'll point to you in my best Dimbleby fashion. And if you could just wait for the microphone to get to you. Lee mentioned at the beginning that we're avoiding, please, any party politicking, so stay away from that, and try to keep your questions short. And the first hand I saw was the gentleman in the striped shirt over there. If you can, oh, you've got the microphone, well done.
Good evening, gentlemen. My question is for the gentleman on the left side. Carwyn, what do we get back for the 55 million we pay in a day to the EU?
What do we get back?
What do we get back?
Okay, thank you. And if you'll be putting questions to both of them, so as long as you're happy getting answers from both of them, thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's give you an example. We've had £2 billion so far this year in terms of European structural funds. We've had more than 10 billion in the last decade. We have £1 billion for rural communities. We get money, for example, to train our young people through schemes like Jobs Growth Wales. 17,000 young people have had training through that. We've had funding to ensure that Swansea University campus was able to be built. We can make sure that we can support our farming industry. We get a lot more out of the EU in Wales than we put in.
Nigel Farage.
Yep, you're quite right. We pay £55 million a day as a membership fee to the European Union, but we do get some money back. We get quite a lot back for agriculture, which makes sense. Some of the rest of it that comes back it goes on inflated salaries to the political class and things like £30,000 for building street furniture in Pontypool. I would suggest that perhaps wasn't very well.
Thank you very much.
What is an absolutely incontrovertible fact is that our net daily contribution as a nation to the European coffers is £34 million a day to be a member of a club who sell us far more than we sell them and who regulate us in ways that are often wholly inappropriate. I repeat, I want to be friendly with Europe. I want to trade with Europe. I have no wish to be part of a political union.
The gentleman with the hand up there, the front, that's it, yeah. That one. And if we can have, I'll come to you. I've got to come there and then there. So we want to see more on this side.
My question is, who do you support? United States of Europe or United Kingdom?
United States of Europe or United Kingdom?
I'll be supporting Wales on the 16th of June. I can promise you that now in the Euros. And I'll support the UK and the European Union.
Nigel Farage?
Well, the question's a very good one because you've actually touched on something. I mentioned earlier they already have a flag. They have an anthem. I have to tell you, when it plays in the European Parliament, I don't stand to attention. It's not for me. They're desperate to have a European army, and they're pushing full steam ahead to have a European army. And effectively, since the Lisbon Treaty, now the European Union has all the attributes of a state. They are building a United States of Europe. If we vote to remain in this union, we're not voting for the status quo. We're voting for a club that is integrating politically incredibly quickly, and strangely, it's doing it without the consent. Without the consent of almost anybody in Europe.
Okay.
Because when the French and Dutch had a referendum on this, on the Constitution, they said no. Us voting to leave will actually open the door for a completely different kind of Europe, and I look forward to that.
Carwyn Jones, your response to that?
Nigel knows full well that there's a two-speed Europe. There are those who are members of the Euro, which we don't want to be a member of, and there are those countries who want to see either no further integration or slower integration. There's no question of us being forced into full integration into the United States of Europe. It's always been a myth.
The point about integration is every single European directive and every single European law, and there are several every month, every single one of them gives more power to the centre in Brussels. You can't get away from it. This union intends to integrate. Whether we're in the fast track or the slow track, it still means a vote for deeper integration.
Thank you. Another question from this gentleman here, and then it'll be the gentleman in the pink shirt, if you can get the microphone then.
Mr. Farage alleged that small business spends something like 25% of their time in administration related to the European Union's rules. If those rules were removed, which would you not replace with national rules? Would it be relating to product safety, or health and safety of workers, or employment regulation to ensure fairness? This is... And you could not get to your 25% without the European Union's accounting rules.
And just
would you abolish accounting and payment of taxes?
All right, okay. And just to remind you, before you start, just to remind you, the questions are going to both. So don't just direct them to one.
When it comes to abolishing accounting, the European Union has done a fairly good job of that itself, hasn't it? By not having its accounts signed off for nearly 20 years. I think the point is this, that we need appropriate levels of regulation. And yes, on health and safety at work. And yes, on environmental law. And yes, small employers need more flexibility with employment law than big employers.
How?
The problem we've currently got...
What rights would you take away?
The problem we've currently got is that we give the same legislation to a company with 3 staff or 2 staff as we give to a company with 1,000 staff. And all the evidence is that if you look at those 5 million men and women who are the big risk takers of this country, if you lift the burden of regulation off their backs, they will create more jobs and more wealth.
Adrian Jones, if you could respond. if you could respond directly to the just to the question and to what Nigel Farage said,
Nigel,
and also there is. Can you bear in mind that the CBI survey that you quoted earlier on also found out that nearly half of all businesses thought of EU-wide employment rights, such as working hours, as a negative. So
I don't think workers' rights are a negative. And Nigel, you create second-class employees then, would you? Those who work for big companies and those with fewer rights who work for smaller companies.
I want more
you
people.
Create a situation where it's easy to sack people. You create a situation where you don't get maternity leave, where people don't get any kind of workers' rights.
I want people
That's what
back
you want.
into work, Carwyn. And here we are in South Wales, where unemployment is some of the highest in the country. And
No, it's not.
And if we take the
unemployment
burden,
in Wales is lower than London. Check your
if we
facts.
take the burden off firms
Lower
like
than
that,
London,
like
Nigel.
that company
Check
in
your facts.
Swansea, they will employ more people. Give our entrepreneurs a chance.
Only a lapsed Tory could say that workers' rights to maternity
Well,
leave,
no one said that.
were a
No one
burden
said
on
that.
employers. Now we have the reality of the situation. What rights would you remove from workers in small businesses?
I said that the audience
would you remove? Come on, answer
I
the
told
question.
you, I don't think there should be ridiculous European legislation
What rights
on
would
that
you remove
company
from workers in small
Swansea,
businesses? Answer the
on
question.
that company in Swansea, where maybe 12 people will lose their jobs. What is the point of that?
okay.
Let's free small businesses up.
I said
By cutting workers' rights. There it is.
getting a word in edgeways
giving
between
them
these two and the
flexibility.
audience is a major challenge. Gentleman in the pink shirt, and then it'll be the woman over here in the pink cardigan. But you first in the pink shirt.
Is this on? I have personal experience of working in a factory where production has slowed down and several of us Welsh workers were laid off. We were told on a Friday not to come in on a Monday as there was not enough work. Yet migrant workers who'd only been in our country for several months were retained. Where is the support for the British worker when this is allowed to happen to us?
Okay, which company was this? You're not saying.
I'm not allowed to say.
All right, so we know what company it is.
Well, there's more than one. I can name you several.
Go on.
And the fact that there are
Name
several
a few more.
companies that they'd
but
ask
name a
you when
few.
you apply for a job, can you speak
Hang on,
Polish?
hang on. If we're going to investigate this properly, we need to know who these people are. Who are the companies?
Well, we could have a go, couldn't we? There's the...
Wait a minute.
Okay, but at the end of the day,
Well,
I don't believe that. Sorry, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that. The reality of the
I can tell you
situation.
All right,
yourself,
okay.
but I can't tell you.
The reality of the situation
All
is
right,
we
okay.
don't know whether that's correct
let's
or
have a
not.
go,
We don't know who the
shall
companies
wait a
are at
moment,
the end of
wait
the
a
day.
It's allowed me to tell you that his own son applied for a job in Aldi's and was told, can you speak Polish? And because he couldn't, didn't get the job. That was in the construction.
Well,
All right, okay.
I can say to you that when
Thank you for drawing attention to the issue, but I want to stick to the issue rather than the specifics. Carwyn Jones, please.
when I go to Aldi in Bridgend, the staff there, they speak English. When I go to retail shops around Bridgend, they're local people, they work there.
All right.
And when I go to factories around Wales, it's right to say that lots of people who are Eastern Europeans work in the abattoirs, that much is true. But when I go to Tata, when I go to Toyota, when I go to Ford, the people who are working there are local people.
Okay.
And the jobs are there for local people.
All right, okay. Thank you very much for making your point. I want to get a point from the woman in the pink cardigan, and then it'll be the gentleman in the red jumper up there on the right, please.
Thank you, Adrian. I'd like to go back to something which was said right at the beginning by Mr. Farage. He wanted to reassert our independence as a nation state, and I quote, "I'm sure I can't be the only person in the room who thinks of themselves as both Welsh and European."
And do you have a question to add to that, or were you just
We
making
are
the point?
in Wales.
All right, okay.
And so
That
my
answer.
question to both our speakers is, do you think of yourself as a European?
Nigel Farage.
Do I pay allegiance to that flag? Do I stand and sing that anthem? Do I call Mr. Juncker Sir every Monday morning when I see him? The answer is no to all three. However, when I say that, I don't think of myself as a European in the context of a political union, but do I think of myself as a European culturally? Well, given that the woman I'm married to came from Hamburg and my daughters are bilingual and we spend time and travel on holiday in Europe, yes, culturally, I think Europe is the most fascinating continent on earth. It's a wonderful place because of its cultural diversity. and I want it to be full of independent democratic states working and trading together.
Carwyn Jones, are you... European, British or
First
Welsh?
Minister of Wales. I'm primarily a Welshman, but I'm also British, and I'm also European. Why should I have to choose between those identities? As somebody who is a proud Welshman, I know that my country has a strong national identity. It doesn't need to be a nation state to express that identity. We've had a strong national identity for many, many centuries. Proud Welshman, proudly British, proudly European.
Gentleman in the red sweater, please. And then it'll be I can see a tattooed arm. It'll be you next.
Thinking about the rest of the UK, including Scotland, do you think that leaving the EU might threaten the unity of the UK?
Carwyn Jones.
Yes, I do. I do. It does worry me. For example, the Northern Ireland peace process had the European Union membership clause as an integral part of that process. It brought peace to Northern Ireland. We don't know what that would mean for Northern Ireland. My worry is that if Scotland votes to stay and England votes to leave, there'll be another referendum in Scotland, and then, of course, we don't know what the result would be. The danger is we leave the EU and you take the great out of Great Britain.
Serious risks there then, Nigel Farage.
Well, it's possible that Luton votes to stay. I mean, would Luton then leave the United Kingdom? I don't know.
But Luton's not a devolved nation.
We are voting on this as a United Kingdom. It will be a collective result of the whole country. As far as Wales is concerned, all the evidence is that attitudes in Wales towards this question are identical to attitudes in England. So if the referendum is yes or no, it'll be the same in Wales. The Scottish argument gets made. Let me just tell you something.
I want to hear from the man with the tattooed arm.
If the United Kingdom votes for independence, would the Scots then vote against independence? I very much doubt it.
Mr. Tattooed Arm, if you can make your point, then it'll be the woman in the green with a piece of paper in your hand. You'll be next.
I do think it's quite a contradiction, Carwyn, when one minute you say you want to take powers away from Westminster and then give them to Wales, but in the same breath, you then want to give them away to the European Union, an increasingly authoritarian political union. That's not democracy, that's authoritarianism.
A point to respond to, Carwyn.
I think powers for health, for education, for policing, for example, should be in Wales. I think the welfare and benefit system, those are issues best decided at UK level. When it comes to trade, I think it's Wales's interest to make sure that there are rules that are the same across the whole of the European Union, so there's no advantage for anybody and everybody plays by the same rules in a market of 500 million people.
Nigel Farage?
No, I couldn't disagree more. I think actually, if there's competition between European countries, that's a good thing and a healthy thing. And actually, because we're signed up to this single market, is the very same reason, Carwyn, that we're forbidden from sitting around the table at the World Trade Organization. We'd be better off charting our own course.
Okay, the woman with the green jacket, and then I need some more people from the back, a bit of positive discrimination on my behalf. The gentleman in the blue shirt, you'll be next after the woman in the green jacket.
Both parties have agreed that Wales is dependent on European economic aid. And I'm just wondering that in the event of the UK leaving Europe, how would both parties, how would both speakers guarantee an equivalent sum to be ring-fenced for Wales?
Okay. Good question. Nigel Farage.
No, I didn't say that at all. You're putting words into my mouth. I did not say that Wales was dependent upon European Union funds. I said it was in receipt of them, and many of them weren't spent very wisely. Let's put it into context. If a few £100 million a year comes into Wales as part of Objective 1 funding, contrast that...
6 billion.
Contrast... Oh, please don't.
2006, 6 billion.
Just laughable. Let's keep it sane. Contrast that.
Let's keep it true.
Contrast that.
Let's keep it polite.
Contrast that to the £16 billion a year that Wales benefits from as a member of the United Kingdom. That dwarfs any money that is coming from the European Union, and Wales would not lose out. The idea that Wales wouldn't get new roads because we weren't part of Brussels, frankly, is nonsense.
And your answer...
Okay,
thank you very much. Your answer to the
Nigel
question.
can't guarantee that we would receive the same level of funding. Why on earth should people take a shot in the dark when they know that the money's on the table now? We have experience of Whitehall, who top-slice money when they send it to us, and we took over council tax benefit. They gave us the budget and then took a cut of 10% out of the budget. I don't trust this current government to give Wales any more money than it needs to.
Okay,
at least I know that money is coming from Brussels and the people of Wales will get it. This government in London won't give us that money.
The gentleman in the blue shirt, and then it's going to be the gentleman in the purple tie, which may give something away after that.
Yeah, can I hear it? Yeah, I can be heard. My question is one, the debate tonight seems to be one of confidence. There seems to be one side that believes...
Did you say confidence or competence?
Confidence, well, probably competence as well, but we won't go down that route. It's one of confidence. There seems to be a confidence in our ability to stand on our own 2 feet and trade with the world, make our own laws and trade, and a lack of confidence on the other side. When did the political class lose its confidence?
Okay. Carwyn Jones.
Well, I mean, Nigel and myself, as I was a part of that political class, I haven't lost my confidence in Wales at all. I think Wales is a confident nation. I think we have a confident future. We need to be an outward-looking nation in Wales. We need to build our economy as we have been doing. But I want us to be part of 2 unions. The UK, Nigel's right, the UK has given us a great deal of benefit. I want to be part of that, but I also want to be a member of the other union that's given us a huge amount of benefits in terms of the billions of pounds that are coming into Wales, in terms of the access to single markets, in terms of the fact that there are companies in Wales who are only in Wales because we are members of the European Union. Why on earth should we have to choose between either?
Okay. Nigel Farage, quick word, please, on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the end, those that vote to remain in the European Union think it's better that our agriculture and our fisheries and our business regulation are made somewhere else, over which we have a tiny minority say at best. I believe in Britain. Okay. I believe we're big enough, strong enough and good enough, and that we should chart our own future course and history. Simple as that.
All right, thank you very much.
Where were you on the Fisheries Council, Nigel? You didn't bother to turn up.
There's a gentleman here at the front who's been very patient. Any hands over this side? There's a. If you can get the microphone to the gentleman in the glasses and the beard there. That one there, yeah, that's it. But you first.
Thank you very much. I was a student at Cardiff University, came over here from England. As part of the European Union, Wales seems obliged to provide grants for tuition fees to European Union students. But English students have to spend £9,000 a year, and international students would have to pay tens of £1,000s a year. Do you believe that's fair?
Well, we provide grants, of course, for our students in Wales. Do I think it's right that students in England pay more? That's a matter for the UK government. But we've made sure that students from Wales are paying only a third in tuition fees compared to students from England. I have sympathy for you. But ultimately, of course, it's a matter for the government in London that hasn't offered you the same level of support as we've offered our students in Wales.
Okay, perilously close to electioneering on that score. Nigel Farage.
Well, it is slightly bizarre that the system discriminates against English students and in favour of students from Poland or France or anywhere else. Okay. It's a ridiculous system. I have to say, though, this is one area where, whilst our EU membership has an influence, I generally think that our central governments and devolved governments have got universities wrong, and we need to start teaching people science, technology, engineering and maths. And that's what really matters.
Thank you very much.
By all means, visit the new science campus in Swansea now.
All right, thank you very much. When the gentleman with the beard, and there's a woman who's been very patient, I've just seen you there, you'll be next, please, with the gentleman with the beard first.
Thank you. Do I need to put it on? Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
The debate so far has been very much on the economy and economics. Mr. Farage made a comment earlier about the passports and the first two words being the European Union. I dread to think that at one stage it may have been the Third Reich. But the question is, do you think that as a result of this union, it has brought peace and stability to the continent of Europe?
In some ways, Nigel Farage, that's the one thing that hasn't been discussed.
No,
this is beyond cost, the cost of stability and peace.
The idea that the French and Germans should get round the table and break bread in the 1950s having tried to bash hell out of each other 3 times in the previous 70 years, was absolutely the right thing to do. What I believe really kept the peace in Europe, though, wasn't the emerging European project. It was NATO, it was the nuclear deterrent, it was the Americans putting a massive investment into protecting us against the potentially dangerous Soviet Russia. Wow. We're now way past the time of any threats from war in Europe, and Tony Blair himself was asked this question, and he answered it by saying, initially, the project was about peaceful reconciliation, but now the European project was about power. And I reckon Blair got it right. And that is becoming now so powerful, you're seeing the rise of really extreme politics of right and left. And I fear that actually the peace of Europe is threatened by trying to force everybody together in one. I think actually Europe looks more unstable than it's looked for many decades.
Carwyn Jones.
Well, I have to say, Nigel, self-awareness is a wonderful thing, as far as you're concerned. But I have to say, if you look at the history of Europe, Europe's history was mainly that of war. Europe's been at peace, in the main, apart from eastern parts of Europe, for many, many years. That's because people have got together and they've said, it's in our interest to work together. It's in our interest to have a market that we can sell in. It's in our interest to have common rules. It's in our interest to work together in order to combat the threat of terrorism. And I saw, in one part of the UK, in Northern Ireland, the influence that membership of the European Union had in bringing peace to that part of the UK. And it's still an unanswered question as to what it means if we leave the EU, or what it means for the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
Okay. All right. I'm afraid I'm going to annoy an awful lot of people because we've only got room for one more question. And the very patient woman who's now got the microphone, so I probably can't stop you asking it anyway.
As a nation, Britain...
Try that again, because I don't think the microphone was on straight away. It's on, you just need to speak now.
As a nation, Britain has ruled themselves for thousands of years, reasonably successfully, prior to becoming a member of the European Union. Why would anybody here not think that we can still do that?
All right. Since time is against us, and I think we're going to hear more on you from that in your closing statement, I'll get Carwyn Jones to answer that.
Well, the current UK, of course, dates back to 1920. So let's remember that the UK, as in its present form, is not even 100 years old yet. But I take your point. The UK has been a state for many, many years, and a powerful state before that. It's still the case that we have British passports. It's still the case that people go through passport control. It's still the case that there's not free movement of people into the UK under the Schengen Agreement, because we're not part of that. But what we've done is say, OK, we're going to keep our identity, but we're going to pool some of that identity for the greater good. We're going to have a situation where we have a big market we can sell into. We're not going to have ridiculous competition between different parts of Europe. The world's getting bigger. China's a big market. The US is a big market. India is a big market. It makes no sense at all for Europe to fragment down into little, small countries, each with their own trade rules. That way leads not to prosperity, but that way leads to fragmentation for Europe and fewer jobs for European workers.
Thank you very much. Unbelievably, that concludes most of the business for tonight. I don't know about you, but I've aged about 10 years over the course of the last hour. We're very nearly at the end. Time for the closing statements from both of our speakers and our final words this evening, though I think it's fairly clear, not for the referendum campaign, however long that's going to be. Try to speak for no more than 2 minutes, please, this time. And we begin with you, Nigel Farage.
Well, thank you very much for the manly way you chaired this debate. And Carwyn, thank you for engaging. Frankly, what I've heard tonight from Carwyn was exactly what I heard 15 years ago from our political class who were then advocating we join the euro. They're out-of-date, tired arguments. We don't need to be in political union to buy and sell goods and services from each other. And we certainly don't need to be bribed with our own money into some form of political dependency, where Carwyn seems to think that Wales couldn't possibly survive and couldn't possibly exist. I disagree with his contention. He believes that in trade and agriculture and fisheries and much else, this country is better governed from the institutions of Brussels. I believe not only would we be better making our own laws in our own countries, but I know that in a genuine democracy, you're able through the ballot box to get rid of bad law. You cannot do that as a member of this European Union. And I say to you, stand up, British people. Let's take back our birthright. Let's regain our democracy.
Thank you. Thank you, Nigel Farage. I don't know about manfully, broken manfully, maybe, at the end of this. Now, Carwyn Jones, your closing statement, please.
Well, could I, in the spirit of the debate, thank Nigel for coming to our nation tonight. It's been a very good debate. It's been well attended, as we can see. And I'm sure many people have been listening all around Wales. And tonight's debate has been about Europe, but it's about much more than that. Because it's about the money in people's pockets, the £3,000 per household, to be precise, right across Wales. It's about opportunities for young people. It's about attracting and keeping jobs in Wales. And it's about our role in the world. We've heard a lot about immigration tonight. Of course, there's got to be a limit on immigration, but there's simply no point trying to put an arbitrary number on it. That's what the Tories have done, and look at the mess that they've created. What they're doing now is ensuring that students, highly skilled people and NHS workers can't come to the UK as a result of their policy. It's madness. It comes from a simplistic promise. On jobs, as I've said, there are 200,000 people who depend on our membership of the EU up and down Wales. From Airbus, you've heard what they've said, and Toyota in the north, to Ford and Tata Steel, you've heard what they've said in the south. I am not prepared to put that at risk, but Nigel will. Because he's gambling on a future where we'd have to negotiate free trade agreements with 50 countries and the EU itself. A future where the UK would still have to pay to sell in the European market, still have to follow EU rules, but have no say on how those rules are made. The worst possible scenario. What would Britain look like outside the EU? I don't think Nigel offered many answers. We can't even be sure the UK itself would stay together if we were outside of the European Union. I don't want Wales and Britain to surrender our place in the world. We are an important country playing an important role in Europe. We want to be on the pitch, not in the crowd shouting. A strong, confident country shaping the future of Europe in an uncertain world. I'll tell you something, that's the future and that's the Wales that I believe in.
Carwyn Jones, thank you very much for your final statement. Nigel Farage, thank you very much for yours. Thank you to the audience, and apologies to anybody whose questions didn't get in during the course of that. Thank you to the Institute of Welsh Affairs for organising this debate. And while I go and find a dark room to lie down in after the end of all this with a flannel over my face, if you could please, once more, thank both of these speakers tonight. Thank you. Really, really well. Thank you.